today. We'll start with just kind of an overview of how we work with students through the job offer process. So we'll be talking about what happens when a student receives an offer and what they should expect. What are some ways that they could respond? And then how do they prepare for having a conversation about the offer? So understanding how to benchmark their salary, assessing the full offer, tools and resources that can be used with students, and then we'll turn it over to our Q&A with our employer guests. Okay, so in the Center for Career Development, I feel like we spend a lot of time coaching a student through the job search process. So there's fine-tuning the resume and the cover letter, tailoring it to specific positions. Then, after sending multiple resumes and cover letters, they land an interview or two or three, and then it's preparing for the actual interview. Then the big event happens. Either a student comes in or sends us an email and says, guess what? I received a job offer. So, of course, this is a highly anticipated part of the process. This is the end goal. This is what they're looking to have happen. So while it is an exciting time, there are also a lot of emotions that are wrapped up in receiving a job offer. So, of course, again, a student would be very excited, right? They could be relieved that they have an offer on the table, especially, students who are graduating and they know they may have student loans and other financial responsibilities that are on their horizon. And so having a job offer is like, yes, I have something. And then it could be a confidence boost because, as we're working with students through this process, there, is some rejection involved, or even worse, sometimes is not hearing anything at all. So actually landing an interview, going through that process successfully, and then having an offer is a huge confidence boost. So these are all positives, and this is what we're expecting. We're really happy for our students. It's a big congratulations. But then on the flip side of the coin, they could be feeling some pressure, uncertainty, and stress in the process. So there could be pressure in needing to make a decision right away because, again, this is a financial decision, and they may think, well, I have this offer, I should just go ahead and take it because what if I don't have something else? They could be uncertain about what to expect in the process or how they should respond and behave in the process. And this, of course, can cause a lot of stress for a student. I find especially with students that maybe don't have a mentor or a parent who is kind of coaching them also through that process. So for example, the student is first gen, maybe they may feel like this is their first time going through this process on their own. So we can really provide that extra support that a student might need to alleviate some of these more pressing emotional responses. So I think, there's a lot that we can do to empower students. And one thing that we could start with is helping them to understand what to expect. And so this should even happen before they receive the offer so that they know what they should be getting into when it is actually time to make that decision. So I try to make sure that students are informed that although an offer may be extended verbally by a recruiter, they do not have to accept on the spot. So again, they may be excited, they may feel like, I need to give an answer right then, but really it's in their best interest, in the employer's best interest for the student or the new grad to really think about it. And although it's extended verbally, the offer will also be sent in writing. So that gives a student or a new grad time to really digest the offer. So, in saying that it's in both parties' best interest, if a student just goes ahead and accepts an offer without having the details, they may not, they may not know what they're getting into, right? But then also, let's say they then get it in writing and then they change their mind, it could prompt them to renege on an offer, and that wouldn't be beneficial to the employer either. So for both parties, it just makes a lot of sense to pause, to take everything in, to read what the offer is in writing, and to go through those details instead of just accepting on the spot. So then it goes to how should a student respond or a candidate? So first and foremost, they should thank the employer for the offer and continue to express interest in the opportunity. Having a job offer is still part of the interview process until it's actually settled. So just as the student was expressing interest and enthusiasm all throughout the interview process, that should continue in the offer process. Now, expressing interest does not mean accepting. So expressing interest, thanking the employer, and then confirming the time frame that they have to consider the offer. So, generally, and we'll have Nancy and Katie share what their process is like, but generally about a week is a good time frame. So, a student or candidate, new grad, could ask, what is the hiring timeline and how long do they have to decide? Now, what complicates this is if that candidate has more than one offer, or they're in the interview process with another organization and the timing isn't quite lining up. This is where it gets particularly tricky. And I feel like this is often what I get when I'm helping a student to negotiate the process is they're kind of grappling with, how do I manage, these other organizations that I'm having conversations with. So it is possible to ask for an extension. I think that students just need to be very careful that they're not saying anything that would turn off their potential offer. So, not saying things like, I need more time to think about it, or I have, something else on the table, so I'm not sure. So they really want to be careful in their wording. So again, in their wording back, the main thing is to express the interest, the sincere interest in the position. And, they could be a little transparent and say, I'm currently in an interview process, and I'd really like to be able to have enough information to make a decision, although I'm very, very interested in your offer. Would it be possible for me to have, a little more than a week to decide, or something like that? Again, they have to really navigate that carefully so that they're not turning off their current employer, but it is possible to be able to navigate that conversation. So a student new to this process may not even know if it's okay to ask questions or if it's okay to negotiate. So we really want them to feel comfortable with that process so that they can make an informed decision. Now, there's a lot of different factors that can kind of get in the way of this process. So in terms of gender inequality, the gender pay gap still exists, and statistically, women tend to accept lower salary offers than their male counterparts. So we want to take that into account when we're coaching our students. There's racial bias that could be at play. Cultural differences could impact the way that a student feels comfortable having conversations about things like salary or expressing their value to an employer. Their financial needs. So again, they may feel like, I have this offer in my hands, I should just take it because I have these financial needs. They may feel like they don't have much to offer. So they may feel like they're on the receiving side and not really acknowledge their own knowledge and experience that they're bringing to a potential employer. And again, we talked about the emotional reaction, and it really could come down to a student's confidence level in having this conversation and approaching the negotiation process. So I really try to stress to students to know their value and to kind of normalize the interview process into more of a conversation. So again, a new grad, soon to be grad, maybe approaching the interview process and the job offer process thinking, I need a job, right? And this employer is in a position to be able to offer me a job, to be able to offer me an open door into their organization. They may feel like they're on the receiving side only. So I think it really helps to have a student kind of sit back and think, what do I also bring to the table? So candidates offer valuable skills, their education, their experience. Otherwise, the employer wouldn't be having this conversation, wouldn't be making this offer. So just as a student is able to receive so many benefits from joining an organization, the organization also benefits from having this talented candidate. And so I think, taking some time to have a student reevaluate what they have to offer can help with that confidence boost, and also help to maybe minimize any nervousness they have about having this conversation about the offer. Really just thinking about it as you're having a conversation to determine if this is going to be a mutually good fit. It also helps for students to come in informed, to know what they should be expecting. And again, a lot of this should happen even before the offer is made, but maybe revisit it before having that conversation after the student receives the details of the offer in writing. So they really should know what they should be expecting in regards to a competitive salary. So a way to do this is by benchmarking. So benchmarking means looking at what are the salary ranges that are out there for similar positions. So the process is to identify the job title and similar titles, research the salary range, and then determine their resistance point. So what are they willing to accept for the position? So one tool that I tend to use with students is salary.com. So on salary.com, you can put in the job title, you can put in the location, and then it also prompts you to put in your education, number of years of experience, and other details that will help to determine the appropriate salary. And this is what you would get. So you would get this range, and then of course the midpoint. So this way students have a general understanding what is a typical, lower salary, what's on the higher end, what's kind of in the middle, and then they can come up with that range for themselves based on this information. Now, the other thing that they can do, and this is a little screenshot of Handshake, is they could actually look at other job titles and other positions that are posted with similar organizations. And if those organizations are publishing their starting salaries, they can take a look at that as well. And then it comes down to a little bit of a personal decision. So we can help to coach students through understanding their own financial needs and their budget to determine, again, what do they really need within that range to be able to support themselves. So what is their absolute resistance point in regards to a starting salary? And again, taking into account their industry, their level of experience, and what that organization's ability is to offer in regards to compensation. Now, they'll have the salary information using that strategy and using those tools. But then salary is only a piece of the pie when it comes to the job offer. I know it's a very important part of the job offer, but there's also all of these other aspects. So there is a lot of value and benefits that employers are able to also make as part of that package. So there's things like having a sign-on bonus. They may pay for relocation, healthcare, retirement plans, the number of vacation days and personal days. This is a very big one now, flex work schedule and being able to work remotely, childcare, tuition benefits, and access to professional development. Also, their ability to be able to progress within the company is another factor. Now, I find that this is the value of these benefits are going to differ depending on the individual and depending on the stage of their life, right? So we want to be very mindful that we're not imposing our own values when coaching a student through this process. So what I may look at retirement planning and say like that's a really big one because maybe that's important for me, but for the student, you really want to listen to them in regards to what's most important for them in their lives and in the stage of life that they're in right now, but also informing them what the different aspects of these benefits are. So I'll give an example. When I was kind of early in my career, I decided to go back to graduate school and I had no idea how I would pay for it. And I ended up interviewing at the same university that I would be attending for my graduate program. So when the offer was made to me, what was of the utmost importance, even above salary for me, was the tuition benefits that I was going to be able to have my graduate degree paid for. Now at this stage in my life, if I were to consider a job offer, I'm not looking to necessarily continue my education. The tuition benefits may be on the lower list in regards to what I value. And like I said, maybe healthcare and retirement might be valued a little higher. I remember also, having childcare benefits during a time that my daughter was young, and that was of importance to me at that particular time. So I have found that when working with students, having a discussion about life and work values first, and then comparing that to what's within the job offer package helps them to really sort this out. And then maybe also helping them to navigate the company's HR page to learn more about these different aspects of the offer so that they feel more informed and empowered in the process. All right. And then it comes down to preparing for that conversation. So they know what they want, they know what they value, they know what the salary range is, they know their resistance point, and now they're coming back to the employer to have a further conversation, to ask a little more about some of these aspects if there are questions after their research, and then to actually accept or negotiate. So preparing for the conversation is really important. Just as a student may have practiced for an interview and gone through that process, they can also practice for the conversation about the offer. So again, I'm stressing this throughout the whole entire process to remind the student to express enthusiasm, to express their interest, to make sure that's very clear to the employer. Then to state what their salary range is. So if they are planning to negotiate on the salary, to be able to present what they know based on their research and see if there's any wiggle room in regards to the starting salary. To ask any questions about the benefits that they learned about in the offer to help them to be able to, again, make an informed decision. So if they had any follow-up questions, they can get clarification at that time. And again, I just want to stress that to be able to minimize any of the nerves, to be able to prepare ahead of time and to practice. So we do offer practice interview sessions for students. So it's really a role play to be able to go through some of these questions and different aspects of the conversation. What I don't think a lot of students realize is that the practice interview can extend to practicing for the job offer process as well. So we want to make sure that we get the word out to students that they have access to this service through the Center for Career Development. And again, they may be having these conversations with all of you as career champions as well. So whoever they're going to, we just want to make sure that they feel empowered, informed, and prepared for the conversation. So at this point, I want to turn it over to our employer guests, so Katie and Nancy, because I think it's really valuable for us to hear from the employer side, what are the ins and outs of this process and what do they recommend for us to share with our students and our soon-to-be grads. So I am going to, I think I'll stop sharing my screen so that we can see everyone. And okay, so if we are ready, I will go ahead and ask the first question. And at this point, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. After I go through a few questions, I'll completely turn it over to the audience. And if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, that's fine as well. So the first question that I have for Katie and Nancy, and whoever would like to answer this first, can you share how your organization presents a job offer to a potential hire, and what should new grads expect from an employer?
Sure, I can start. Katie and I are going to have to, you want to go, maybe we'll switch off or something. And I think one thing that's going to be interesting in this conversation is that Katie and I both have very different systems, and we are in different sectors. So hopefully that will give a nice variety of what new grads can expect. At person to person, the most important characteristic of our organization is that we're a nonprofit, and that really defines a lot of how we interact with people that we hire and what we can and can't offer. And that obviously impacts what people should and shouldn't be negotiating for. So the process that we go through for hiring is typically, we have a number of steps through our interview process, and a candidate will meet with a variety of different people, including the person that would be their direct supervisor. And then we will first make an offer in person. So we'll reach out to somebody by phone. It always takes longer than anybody thinks. And I learned early in my career to not promise people when we would get back to them, because sometimes there can be back and forth and you don't want to close any doors. So one piece of advice would be patient. You might feel like you should hear back within a day or two of your interview or your final interview. And it often takes a week or two once we close interviews, before we were ready to make an offer to a candidate. So we will first reach out by phone and have a conversation about the offer and the terms of the offer, including pay, hours, supervisory structure, time off, benefits, vacation, paid time. And we sort of walk through all of that, make sure that we've answered any questions that the person has, and the start date. And once all of that information is finalized, we'll present a written letter. So the formal acceptance does not take effect until that written offer has been made. The candidate has a chance to see it all in writing, make sure that they are in agreement with all of the terms, and come back to us to formally accept. Now, at the time that we provide a written offer, by then we've negotiated all of the terms. It's really almost a confirmation, so that the person has an official record that they have been offered the position and that they accept it. And one of the reasons that's the last step is because we do include in that written offer the person's start date and their salary and all of the other terms. So we would expect before that, that we would make an oral offer in a conversation, and the candidate, I would never expect to accept on the spot, as Tara said. And I think that one of the things that's important to think about when you're the candidate is that when I make an offer, that negotiation and what happens after I make the offer is part of what shows me what kind of employee you will be. So I'm still interested to know, what kind of employer are you going to be? Are you going to be a team player? Are you going to take this seriously? Are you committed? Are you enthusiastic? So when I make the offer, when I make that phone call and I say, congratulations, we'd like to make an offer, I want to hear enthusiasm. I want to hear gratitude. I want to hear somebody say, that's so wonderful. Thank you so much. I would like to think about it. I expect them to think about it, because I don't want an employee who's not going to be thoughtful. So it is expected to think about it. It's okay to ask, when do you need an answer? When do you expect an answer? It's okay to ask for guidance on some of those things. I think that shows maturity. And it's okay to come back with questions. You don't need to negotiate or be prepared to negotiate the minute you get the offer. It's okay to say, can I think about this overnight and come back to you with questions tomorrow or in 2 days, or state what your timeline is. And then think carefully about all of your questions. And when you come back to me, bring them all. Don't come back one at a time. So I don't want to have a conversation about salary and we agree on salary, and then have you come back to me again and say, well, you know what, now can we talk about work from home? Like, be thoughtful about all of the terms and conditions. And Tara said this, but salary is only one of them. When somebody comes back to me, I want to make sure that they're going to be an employee who's going to be a good fit with our firm. So questions about work from home, that's a hot topic right now, because a lot of people want to have work from home, or flexibility in the schedule. Those are all conversations that show me who you are and what's important to you in a workplace. So when you present them, you want to make sure that you're presenting them as a team player, as somebody you're going to go above and beyond in this job, and you're going to do what the best job you can do, but you want to understand before you say yes, because you take your commitments seriously, right? You're very serious about your commitments. You don't want to make a commitment if you're not, serious about it. So you want to make sure that you've thought about all of these aspects. I'm going to just stop there to give Katie a chance to chime in, because I can keep talking and talking about all sorts of different things. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so with Enterprise, how we extend an offer, like Nancy said, through the interview process, they're meeting with different managers, their direct manager, as well as our territory's group rental manager. And so with that, when someone is extending an offer, it is their hiring manager that will call them to extend the offer. Like Nancy said, there's some people who are eager to get a job offer and they'll accept on the spot, but one thing our managers will say is we need you to at least take 24 hours to think about it. Yes, are we excited that you're excited to come on board? Absolutely. But one of the most challenging things that we can come across is when you accept an offer and then a couple days later you back out or you start to waver on that. So we want to make sure the students or the candidate that we're talking to has had time to think about that decision before they say yes. That said, after the area manager or their hiring manager has had that conversation with them, we will send an offer letter that outlines pay, benefits, start date information, all again pending successful completion of their background checks, which is something that we stress to our candidates. Is yes, we want to extend this offer to you. You do have to pass the background check process, and we'll go through those steps with them. In terms of negotiations, Enterprise does not negotiate salary. So in our interview process, first interview, we review our pay structure with our candidates. Enterprise only promotes from within. So we'll talk about the starting pay and hours for the position, as well as the time frame for promotion and the kind of pay that comes with those next steps. So everyone starts on a level playing field in our company. So we do not have to, go through that negotiation process with the candidate. That said, like Nancy said, if the candidate has or the student has questions about time off, about benefits, having that list of questions together all at once to have that conversation is something I think is important, because I've had students or a student recently send me emails firing off every 1 to 2 days with different questions, and at that point it's time consuming, it looks slightly unprofessional, disorganized, and I want to be able to communicate all the information I can effectively, but a phone conversation or a call like this I think is a lot more impactful than continually emailing with different questions. But yeah, again, we encourage students or candidates that we offer to come back with questions. Again, we want to make sure they feel confident in the decision and that they are excited to join the team and be a part of our culture, because that wavering, like Tara said, it's you have to be delicate when you're talking about other job offers that you're exploring, or if you're in the interview process with another employer. We want to give you that time to think about your job offer. So typically we'll give candidates a week, but we don't want to hear, I'm almost done with the interview process for another business. My next interview with them is on Thursday. Can I at least wait until I hear back from them? That's not, giving me confidence that we're your number one choice. So I want to make sure that, if you have students that are coming to you with different job offers, again, like Tara said, they're treating that situation a little delicately when communicating with different employers about the time frame that they need.
Thank you. So Katie, you mentioned that at Enterprise, there's really not much room for negotiation. Is that something that is made clear to a candidate when the offer is made? And how is that understood, or how can a student understand when a job offer is negotiable or what aspects are negotiable? So maybe Katie, if you can answer the first part, and then Nancy, I'd love for you to chime in on what aspects of your offer are typically negotiable?
Yeah, in our interview process, the first interview that the candidate has with a talent acquisition professional like myself, we walk through the pay for the position and we say that it is not negotiable. So we want at that time for the process to be very transparent. So if the candidate is not comfortable with the pay, they want a position that might offer different pay, they know right away, and we're not waiting until the point of offer to have that conversation.
So I would say we will negotiate, although in a nonprofit, typically there's not a lot of room for negotiation because we tend to have a fairly flat pay structure, and pay more often in nonprofits than in the for-profit sector is tied to the role rather than the person in the role. I think in a private company, there's much more opportunity for some negotiation. But what nonprofits offer that is, what we think some quality of life benefits that some for-profit companies don't have is some of the soft benefits, the flexibility, the paid time off, sometimes opportunity for education, reimbursement for education or professional development. And particularly at the beginning of your career, I think it's important to really think about the value of those characteristics of a job, in addition to the culture and working in a workplace that might align with your values. Those are aspects of work that you can really explore during the negotiation process. I think also if you explore pay ranges, and I do want to mention that one of the trends that's really happening, particularly in the nonprofit sector, is to publish pay ranges on job descriptions. And this is going to happen more and more often. So, before you start interviewing and even before you apply, you sort of know what the range is. If you're going to try to negotiate outside of that range, you really need to understand why. Don't negotiate just to negotiate. Negotiate if you genuinely have a financial situation that requires a higher salary, or a life situation that genuinely requires some flexibility. So one of the things that we'll see is we might have candidates who also have caregiving responsibilities at home, either for an aging parent or for a child. And that's fine with us. We are open to negotiating around that. Is there flexibility in the schedule? If somebody leaves early on Thursdays, can they work a longer day on Tuesdays? Those sorts of things are completely negotiable, at least in most nonprofit sectors. But you should think carefully about what is important to you. I think another thing to think about, if you get the message that there's not a lot of negotiation in salary at the beginning of or when a job offer is made, you can ask what is the professional development and performance management system? When is the next opportunity for advancement, career advancement, and negotiating raises, perhaps, because that can tell you sometimes, maybe you're going to come in at a starting salary, but if you prove yourself to be a really valued employee, you may be able to negotiate a raise in 3 months rather than 6 months. And that's something that employers like, because they get to see how valuable you really are. And if they do like you and want to keep you and see the value that you add, they may be willing to increase that, or to step up that process. So it's another way to sort of get your foot in the door and prove yourself. And I think that's valuable, particularly in the beginning of your career, because the truth is you have less negotiation ability when you're at the beginning of your career, rather than when you have specific skills and experience that an employer might want. So if you are looking at a position that is going to teach you, that you're going to learn, that you're going to grow, that has real value. And it might be worth starting at a lower salary than you'd hoped if you're going to gain experience and hopefully grow within that company.
Thank you so much. You mentioned about salary being mentioned, early on in the process. So sometimes it's published with the job posting. For both of your organizations, how do you tend to disclose salary? Is it something that a candidate would know right at the beginning of the process, of the application process, or is it asked during the interview process? Sometimes students are asked, what are your salary expectations? So for enterprise and for person to person, how is that typically handled? Or is it at the time of the job offer?
So we're now publishing salary ranges on job postings. So that's out there in front. I personally think that it's a terrible practice to ask a candidate what their salary requirements are. I think it's unfair because as an employee, as an employer, I know what my range is. I know what I can afford and what I can't afford. And there's lots of data around that practice of asking a candidate's salary requirements being used to underpay people. So we don't do that. And we are moving toward now all job postings will have a salary range.
And with us as well, our salary is posted in our job postings. So candidates can see that. And again, we bring it up in our interview to be as transparent as we can. So if someone is right off the bat not comfortable with the pay, they can choose to self-select out of the process before moving any further.
Is there anything else that you can share in regards to etiquette with this process? So Katie, for example, you mentioned what you don't want to hear, that a candidate has an interview coming up on Thursday and they'd like to have that interview before getting back to you. In a similar scenario, what would be the better thing for a candidate to say? And is there anything else that a potential candidate should think about in regards to how they communicate?
Yeah, I think like Nancy said, it's expressing that, gratitude and excitement for the offer, but, being intentional about it. There's factors to consider. I want to take time to review all of the benefits, career path or opportunities that enterprise offers to make sure, it's the right track or career for me. I think focusing more on, communicating that you value that company and that offer, but you want to look specifically at that rather than saying you're comparing it to another company. Because when it comes to asking for extensions, that's something, that we are willing to do. If you need more than a week, we want to be a little bit flexible. But if we know you're just going to keep asking for extensions until you're done with an interview process with another company, that's something that's going to rub, that employer the wrong way and potentially turn that job offer around. So I think it's, portraying it as you want to make sure that, what that company has to offer fits with your needs. Like you said, the various factors that that candidate might find important other than salary. I think, presenting it like that versus a comparison would be a better way to approach it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there some diplomacy is required in some of these negotiations, and sometimes you will get painted into a corner, which can be tricky. But to the extent you can keep things general, I think it's fine to say you're my top choice, but I do have, I am interviewing with some other companies, and I feel like I need to give them the courtesy of finishing that process. If you can display that you have integrity, I think that shows that you have good character. And so you don't want to, the same way I as an employer don't want you to ghost me, right, for example, or some other things, I also want to see that you're not the type of person that would do that to another employer. So I will respect your professional integrity if you let me know you are looking at multiple offers, or you're in the process, but from what you know right now, we are really your top choice. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear that we're your top choice, even if it's not entirely true. That said, I think it's important to be honest. You should not be dishonest in the interview process. So you need to make sure that you are really displaying integrity. That's very, very important.
Thank you. So I want to turn it over to our career champions. I think there are some questions that are coming in on the chat. So
yes, I could read the first one. When asking to negotiate the salary, what is the best way to open that conversation?
That's an excellent question, because that's hard. And I think usually the employer is going to tell you what the salary is. And I think it's important to be prepared coming into that conversation, knowing what, lots of tips that Tara gave were great tips. Know what your bottom line is. Like, at what point are you willing to walk away? If there's a salary that, if I can't meet your salary as an employer, I do not want you to take my job that I'm offering you if you're not sure that you're going to stick around for a year, because then I'm going to be stuck having to rehire. And as an employer, it's time consuming and it's costly. There's a lot of cost associated with employee turnover. So I don't want you to accept the job unless you really feel confident that it's a job that you can afford to stay at. So I think you need to know what that number is. You need to know in your head. I think you should not negotiate just to negotiate, but I think you can open the conversation by saying something like, I expected that it might be a little higher than that. I think this is a great position, but I think I want to think on that. Is there room for negotiation here? I think another important, something that's very important to think about is, who are you negotiating with? So you're going to have a very different negotiation if you're talking to the person who will be your supervisor or your boss, as opposed to like an HR recruiter. So if you're talking with a firm or even the HR department, you're going to be able to be a little more direct. What you don't want is to start off your relationship with your employer, the person that you're going to report to, in anything less than really positive. Another thing that I think is important to think about is being realistic about what your worth is. Understand what your worth is. If you negotiate a higher salary, you have now set a higher bar for your performance. I've had employees who have negotiated higher salaries than I was willing to pay originally, and then sort of fell short of expectations. And that's a problem, because if you tell me you're worth more than what I'm offering, I need to see that you're worth more than what I'm offering. So make sure that you're confident that you're worth what you're asking. And then you can say that. You can say, you know what, I think this is what I bring. Summarize. I bring this, I bring that, I bring the other thing. And from the research I've done, that the salary range for somebody of my expertise or my skill level or my experience is is a little higher, or is whatever, say what your number is, but back it up with some persuasive evidence about why you're worth more than that.
That's great. Thank you for that. Kitty, do you have anything to add?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
Nancy said it right.
Excellent. All right, we have another question. For employers that are not transparent about the salary range of a position, would you recommend that an applicant task for a salary range before being asked to interview?
This is so unfortunate, because I wish the answer is yes, but I just don't think you can. If the first question you ask about is salary, the message you've given to that potential employer is you don't care about the job necessarily. You're going to go to the highest bidder. So if you come to work for me, in 6 months, if somebody offers you more money, you're going to leave. That's not the impression you want to give an employer.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I will say with Enterprise, we heavily recruit on college campuses. So there are times where I'm reaching out to students via Handshake or other platforms to attract them to our jobs. That said, if a student has a question about a position that maybe they see on Handshake or they've met someone at a career fair, it's okay to set up a call with that person, especially recruiters. We want to talk about our jobs, but I think it's important to not just focus on the pay. If pay is your only question, I don't think it's worth having that conversation. But if you want to learn more about the opportunity, other benefits, if you didn't have time to complete those conversations when you first spoke with them, I would think that's appropriate to learn more overall about the company or position. But if your only goal is to talk about pay, like Nancy said, I wouldn't necessarily think that's the appropriate thing to do.
Great, thank you. Okay, is it okay to ask the salary range during the interview if it isn't advertised or mentioned by the employer? But later in the discussion, so not as the first question, but later in the discussion.
So probably not during the first interview. Sometimes you can get away with it at the very, very end of the first interview. And if pay really is critical and you're not sure that the position is going to pay what you need, you can try to bring it up tactfully, but do it in a way that demonstrates that you genuinely have, you don't want to waste my time, because you genuinely do have these absolute needs that if the pay is not aligned, you don't want to, you're being respectful by addressing it now, getting it out of the way, because you don't want to waste your time and my time if the pay is not going to be what you need. But make sure that you really need to have that conversation. Sometimes it can be a little presumptuous. You need to make sure you're not being presumptuous, because at the end of your first interview, the employer might not be thinking about asking you back. So if you're going to talk about pay, you're making the assumption that you're going to make it on to the next round of interviews. So you have to be very careful about it. I suggest you not bring it up during the first interview. If you get called back for a second interview, it will come up. And if you don't get called back for a second interview, it doesn't matter what the pay was. You just chalk it up to learning, because you always learn. Every interview, you learn something about yourself and about the process. And good interviewing takes a lot of practice. So every interview, even if you don't get asked back for a second interview, is excellent practice.
I agree. I mean, like I said, we bring it up in an interview for our company, but that said, there are times where a candidate will bring it up before I do. And then they kind of dig themselves into a hole because they say their pay expectation is this. We don't negotiate. So when I ask if our pay is acceptable, and they kind of backtrack because they want a position, but now they've already told me what their kind of pay expectation is versus what we offer, that doesn't paint them in the greatest light. And like Nancy said, you're going to take the job because it's a job you're offered, but in 6 months, when you find something different, you're going to jump ship. So I think, like she said, it's important to tread lightly unless it's brought up to you. The first interview, again, is probably not the place to address it.
Katie, I wanted to circle back, and this is another question that's in the chat as well, relating to something that you mentioned. So you mentioned that part of the job offer process is having the candidate go through a background check and other, documentation. So while that's happening, how long should a candidate wait before checking back in with you? And I'm imagining, maybe a potential candidate also navigating, a job offer coming in from another company. And so they're waiting to hear the final okay from you, but then now they have another offer, but you're their first choice and they want to know, they want to check in on the process. How long should they wait, or should they even check in? Should they just be patient and let the time go by and wait?
Yeah, when we let the candidate know that their background checks are running, we give them a time frame of the typical turnaround time we have for our background checks. I'm okay with a candidate checking in, once to see how the process is going. But when we give the time frame, unless there's something that I get feedback from the background check company that's going to take a longer time than usual, I'm going to contact them. So I think one check-in is okay. If you're checking in more than once, in the time frame that you were given that was established for the wait time, sometimes that makes me think that there's something that's going to come back on your background check and you're just waiting for us to, you're checking in to see if we found it yet. We've had that situation, happen a couple times. So I think being patient is important. But again, if you want to check in once, I like to see that you want to start. I like that enthusiasm, but there's a point where the constant check-in, if it's still, within 7 to 10 business days is what we say. Did you listen to what I said if you're continually checking in? But yeah, I think one check-in is okay. If you're, constantly reaching out, it gets a little concerning.
Thank you. We have another question in the chat. I sometimes have students who are nervous that an offer might be pulled if they ask to negotiate salary. Can you speak to what you would say to these students to ease their concerns?
I would say the only reason it's, at least in my experience and in the nonprofit experience, it's unusual to pull an offer unless there's something that shows up in the background check or references come back with some red flags. Once an employer has made an offer, they've already made up their mind. They're committed. So they've already, they want you. So if you are negotiating tactfully and with love for the job, I think it's not going to, I don't think the risk of having an offer pulled should be the main concern. When you negotiate, you want to keep enthusiasm front and center, that you really do want this job. You just want to make sure that you can find a way to make it work. If negotiations get to the point where I've sort of made it clear that I have a ceiling and I'm not willing to go above that, or the terms you've asked for, I can't do, there's some things I can't do. So for example, we have set paid time off. Everybody gets 4 weeks of paid time off. I can't give somebody 5 weeks of paid time off and other people 4 weeks of, so it's just, some things are not negotiable because of just for equity reasons. So if the negotiation sort of goes on about points that in my view are closed, that will give me a red flag. And at some point I would pull an offer, but I would only pull an offer if I felt that the candidate had told me through their behavior that they are going to be a problem and they're not going to be happy and it's not a good fit and it's not going to work out. So as long as you're negotiating sort of in good faith with integrity and honesty and enthusiasm, I don't think you're going to risk having a job offer withdrawn. You just have to know when the negotiation's done, when you've taken it as far as you can.
Great, thank you. Tara, do you see any more questions? Oh, yeah. If you ask if you can think if over and they say they need to know and call the next day for an answer, is that a concern? How should a student or candidate respond?
That is a great question, because the same way you're negotiating reveals who you are to an employer, the way your employer negotiates reveals to you who your employer is. And so if somebody is being unrealistic, I cannot imagine an employer actually doing that. If they did, I think that is a red flag. And I think you have to take that into consideration with all of your other information that you're getting about that workplace. And I think it's important, someone in the chat is saying that actually happened. I'm so surprised by that. If you're able to find out other people who had worked in that same company, I think it is a good idea to sort of ask around a little bit and find out what the experience is of other employees who have worked there.
Now, a great resource that I love to use with students is Glassdoor to find out a little bit more about employees' experiences with their companies and organizations. If there seems to be a red flag that you're seeing. All right, we have 2 minutes left, so I don't know if anybody has one last final burning question. If not, I guess we can just add, if Nancy or Katie, if you have any final pieces of advice. Everything you shared has been amazing, but any last words before we end today?
I would just stress in this job market with how many opportunities are out there, that students keep in mind all of the different parts of a job offer that come into play other than pay. I know that's the big sparkly thing that people see or hear, but opportunities for advanced